Me today, and I'm really looking forward to talking with all of you about what I hope and I expect to hear from President Biden in tonight's State of the Union address about his plans to continue dealing with the economic effects of the pandemic, like inflation and gas prices, take some of the stress off of our workers and families by lowering costs for things like quality childcare and health coverage and prescription drugs, and keep working towards a stronger and fairer future for our state and our country and our democracy. Let me just start by saying this. I've been talking to people across our state from the start of this COVID-19 pandemic about the impacts to them. And I know, as a mother and a grandmother and a US Senator, the last 2 years have been some of the toughest that I can remember in our state. If you are a parent like McKendry, she's one of my virtual guests tonight, you've been struggling to figure out school and work and childcare and keeping everybody safe with the ground constantly shifting underneath you. If you're a small business owner like the restaurant owners in Spokane and Seattle that I talked to last week, 2-year-long fight to keep your doors open with the odds stacked against you the entire time. If you're a healthcare worker or a teacher or a bus driver or a student, I could go on. It's hard to think about a single person who has not suffered deep losses or had their lives upended in huge ways. So there's no question that the pandemic has taken a huge toll, and it continues to. But we have made a lot of progress since this time last year. Because of the American Rescue Plan, which we passed about a year ago now, we got shots into arms. We reopened our schools safely. We got support for our small businesses. We eased expenses for more than 1.3 million kids in our state, thanks to the child tax credit alone. We got 240,000 more people in Washington state healthcare coverage. And 2 in 5 customers on our state's health insurance marketplace were able to get coverage for less than $100 a month. That bill, the American Rescue Plan, made a big difference. 6.6 million jobs back into the economy since about a year ago. But there is, of course, more work to do. We've seen but I think it's important to say we have seen a much stronger and faster economic recovery because of that passage of that bill, which I will remind all of you, no Republican voted for it. It's made a huge difference for us in Washington state. Soon after that, we got to work on the bipartisan infrastructure law that we passed this fall. And because of that bill, we will see good paying jobs in every part of our state. We're going to see safer roads and bridges, more public transit, high-speed internet in every community, and a lot more, including my bill to transition our school bus fleet to electric so our kids are not breathing in diesel exhaust as they travel to and from school. I don't think we should understate what a big deal the bipartisan infrastructure law really is. It is the largest investment in clean energy and public transit in our country's history. And it is the largest investment in our roads and bridges since we built the interstate highway system. This is going to make a big difference for all of our communities across Washington state. But again, as I'm sure we'll hear from President Biden tonight, there is more to do. I've said often, and I believe very strongly, we need an economy that works for everyone, not just the wealthiest Americans and the biggest corporations. And that is especially true coming out of this pandemic. And that's why one of my very top priorities in Congress right now is passing legislation that will lower everyday costs for working people in a big way. Because one of the things we really saw is that while workers and families lost their jobs, their income, their stability, huge corporations and the very wealthiest actually did better than ever before. Major corporations ended 2021 with record profits, and the top 1% of Americans got richer over the course of the pandemic. And meanwhile, people who were doing their own grocery shopping and pumping their own gas are finding their money doesn't go far enough. not to mention childcare, health coverage, prescription drugs, education. All of that adds up so much for families today. It should not be so expensive for working people to raise a family and do the things you want to do in our country. And Democrats are going to keep working to make sure it isn't. I hope and I fully expect to hear President Biden doubling down on dealing with those challenges tonight. And I'm especially looking forward to hearing his plans to do more on tackling inflation and gas prices. We will continue to be full steam ahead. And one of the big ways we can do that is give some relief by lowering costs for those bigger ticket budget items that every family has to deal with. Passing my childcare and pre-K proposals will actually save working families in our state thousands on childcare and make quality childcare easier to find. I also want to see an expansion of the expanded child tax credit. And if we have to reach a compromise with Republicans to be able to extend that child tax credit, then I'm not going to be the perfect. I'm not going to let perfect be the enemy of the good. It's just too important. I will work with anyone to make sure we can extend that. We need to lower healthcare costs. It's got to be a priority. We need to extend the tax cuts towards people's premiums from the American Rescue Plan. And I believe very strongly, this is our opportunity to lower prescription drug costs in a big way by finally empowering Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices and taking other important steps like capping the cost of insulin at $35 per month. And it is past time that we finally deliver a landmark investment in climate action and clean energy, because we are seeing the catastrophic effects of climate change in our state. And here's the other piece that's really hitting home right now. We've got to transition to lower cost, cleaner energy so we aren't reliant on costly foreign oil. That's going to lower costs in the long term. It will strengthen our economy and our national security. There's certainly a lot more I'd like to do to help workers and families, including, by the way, a national comprehensive paid leave policy, home care, pathway to citizenship. So whatever we are not able to pass as part of a larger legislative package for moving forward on lowering costs, I'm going to be looking to see what ways we can do this either through appropriations or any other legislative avenues that are available to us. But the bottom line is my priority is getting a strong bill to President Biden's desk that will lower Washington state workers and families' costs and take some of that stress off. And by the way, these policies are all paid for by asking major corporations and the very wealthiest to pay their fair share. And as we work to lower costs, we also need to think about what kind of future we want for our kids and our grandkids. I know what I want. I want a future that Washington state kids and parents can be hopeful about. I've covered some of this, like major action on climate, because I want kids in Washington state today to go for a hike in the Cascade Mountains or run around on Long Beach, knowing that we acted to make sure they can enjoy it their whole lives. I'm also very determined to put every resource I can towards helping kids recover emotionally and in terms of their learning from this pandemic. When we passed the American Rescue Plan, I actually made sure that funding was set aside specifically for helping our students catch back up academically after the last 2 years. And that money needs to be spent right in our state and right across the country. I'll be following that very closely. I'm also working on some new bipartisan steps to help young people and all Americans with stronger steps on mental health. This is a serious crisis in our country. And I know this is something that President Biden is very focused on. And I also know he agrees on the urgency of acting to stop senseless gun violence in our schools and our communities with common sense gun safety reforms like universal background checks. Another part of a brighter future for our state and country is standing up for the rights that Americans care so much about. Right now, we're seeing extreme Republican legislatures across our country increasingly restrict women's deeply personal decisions around whether and when to become parents, and every American's fundamental democratic right to be heard at the ballot box. These are real intrusions on people's ability to make their own choices about the kind of future that they personally want and the kind of country that they want to live in. I'm not standing for it, and neither are President Biden and Democrats. And another thing that we can't and won't stand for, Putin's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. It's a sovereign nation. I'm really grateful for President Biden's leadership in making it abundantly clear through severe sanctions and strong international coordination that there will be devastating economic consequences for this war of aggression. And to my Washington State constituents with family and loved ones in Ukraine, know I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure our country does all it can to stand firmly behind the Ukrainian people. So listen, I'm grateful to everyone in our state who's done so much to get themselves, their families, their businesses, their community through this really horrific pandemic. And I'm going to keep listening to you and fighting for you every day in the other Washington. And I'm grateful about the state of our union and the work we can get done in the coming year. And I'm hopeful about the state of our union and the work we can get done in the coming year to really help our Washington State workers and families continue to rebuild coming out of this pandemic and make our economy work for working people, not just those at the top, and continue our fight for a stronger, fairer future for our kids and for generations to come.